We're joined now by Erol Morkoc, who's a spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK, and Jim Kennedy, who's a former advisor to President Bill Clinton. Good evening to you both. Thank you for your company. Jim, I'll start with you as the former Clinton advisor. Has Trump failed in his bid to bring peace to Ukraine?
Well, it's too early to say he failed. I think those who say that are really looking at optics, and what really counts is the end result, so it's too soon to say. I do think there is legitimate concern about what happens ultimately, because there are isolationist voices close to the White House, and if he listens too much to those voices, we could end up with a bad result. But it is too early to say he failed.
So, Jim, can I ask, I mean, I assume you're of the left of the argument on political matters in the United States. Why are so many lefties kind of absolutely losing their minds over this deal, saying that Trump has failed, going mad, absolutely mental at the fact that Putin rode in the beast, the limousine, just all sorts of nonsense, saying that Caroline Leavitt, the White House spokesperson, was looking sort of sullen and ashy-eyed and so on. Just absolute nonsense on the likes of MSNBC and so on. What's going on with this kind of deranged reaction?
Well, it is somewhat deranged. I'm a moderate Democrat. I think there's about 5 of us left in the party, unfortunately. But they, they're really concentrating on the optics here. Although my old boss Hillary Clinton did say that if he succeeds in getting this agreement, she'll nominate him herself for a Nobel Peace Prize. So I liked what she said about that. Ultimately, the proof is in the pudding. The optics don't matter. The result does matter.
Yeah, no, I saw those Clinton comments. We've got some clips later on in the show. OK, Erol, let's have a chat with you. What's your take on what happened yesterday in Alaska? Was President Trump, was he outplayed by Putin, or are we going to see some progress once Zelensky gets to Washington on Monday?
Well, look, I think it was a positive step, and unless I'm entirely misreading the situation, you have 4 years of nobody talking in terms of the U.S. president and the Russian president. Now we're having any form of detente, I think is a positive. It seemed like a very well choreographed experience. There was no situation except maybe in people were expecting perhaps a more bombastic press conference. That didn't happen. Some people said that worked in Putin's favor. And there's this weird sort of trope where the Americans have this kind of arrogant ideology where, oh, we're granting you an audience. You're getting this great honor to meet with us. I mean, that's not how Trump sees things. He'll sit down and he'll meet with anybody, even people who prior administration said, we'll never sit down and talk to them, people like Kim Jong-un. So the idea that they got together, had some handshakes, took some notes from each other, and are going to go back and talk to their respective parties. Trump has a little bit more people to talk to than President Putin, and hopefully go forward. I don't see any negative, and I can't possibly see any takeaway here that's negative that isn't really an extraordinary spin that sort of would be laughed off by any serious person, moderate or otherwise.
Erol, just quickly, what does it do for the state of politics and democracy in the United States when you have the Democrats, or a lot of them anyway, excluding Jim, who, as by his own admission, seems quite moderate, who really can't ever bring themselves to credit President Trump for anything? I remember him saying once, was it at the State of the Union address, he says, I could cure cancer and you guys sitting in front of me would find some way to critique me. What does that do for the state of democracy and politics in the United States?
Well, look, on one hand, I would say it's unhealthy. On this other hand, I would say that's what's driven people like myself from the University of California, Berkeley to the Republican Party, by encountering people who were not willing to interact with data, who were not willing to have discourse, who were not willing to have any sort of leeway on this single issue, started to create division. And all of a sudden, the pushback, it made itself evident in the election, where we became the party of the working class, the party of the union voter, and the majority of the electorate. And that is the result of this. So yes, it's negative at first glance, but the American people aren't stupid, and the American people don't like to be sort of treated like children. And that's sort of the result of all of this, has been a stronger, more united Republican Party. So it's negative for the overall Democratic sentiment, for discourse, and for the quality of life in the country. But it has brought a lot of people over from the middle and from the left to our side of the common sense wing. And I guess maybe that's a positive in the long run.
Yeah, Jim, last word to you. When did you work for President Clinton as an advisor?
I was with him towards the end in the White House, and also in his post-presidency in the early 2000s, so about 8 years.
What would he have done, do you think, in this situation with Putin, Russia, Ukraine? What would you have advised him?
Well, I think he would have gotten involved. He got involved in helping deal with the Balkans when he was president. He was very involved in the Middle East. He almost reached an agreement towards the end of his term, but the Palestinians got cold feet, unfortunately. So he was very much in favor of negotiating and doing it in person. And so I think he would be in favor of the concept of talking. I think ultimately, as I said, what the contours of any agreement is ultimately what matters. But I think he is and would be supportive of talking.
Yeah, and just finally, Jim, I'll have to ask you, do you think Trump derangement syndrome is a real thing?
I think it's a real thing. I think it's a real problem for the party. I think the party has to get back to its own roots. I do think there is a shift in the working class towards the Republican Party. Those traditionally are Democratic voters. I think they can be won back with the right kind of leadership, sensible, moderate leadership. And so I think that's going to be the next midterms. I think we'll start to tell that tale.
Great stuff. Jim Kennedy, former advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Erol Morkoc, who's a spokesperson for Republicans overseas UK. Thank you both very much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Right, now to the